Chess Lessons. Episode 1, How do the pieces move? First we're going to talk about the pawn. Jewel, how do the pawns move?
The pawn, I'm doing this from the black side because that's the side without the camera blocking the whole thing. On the first move, they can go 2 squares, but most of the time they can only go 1. So you can only move every chess piece once during a turn. On the first one you can do this, but sometimes you also can do this. This is how you normally move. But you can move like this if it's only the first step.
The first step for that pawn?
Yes.
Okay, so put yours back. And so I'm going to move my first pawn too. What do you do?
So, I move it too.
Okay.
Now, the thing is pawns can only attack diagonally.
Okay, so you set it up so I can attack that pawn.
Yes, but I can also attack you.
But I get to go first.
Yep.
So kablam! Pawn taken.
Yep.
Alright, now we're going to talk about the bishop. Jewel, which piece is the bishop?
This piece. It's almost like a larger version of a pawn. As you can see.
Okay.
There's more, but there's a flat top and a long line through it. Like an unhappy smile. So
there's a slit like an unhappy smile in its bishop hat.
Yep.
And how do they move?
Since this one started on the white square, it can only move diagonally and on white squares.
All right. So your black bishop there, it cannot move yet, right?
No.
So what moves do you have to do to develop it and get it out?
First, to do that, I got an idea. Oh wait, no.
All right.
Once I do that, now I can take this here if I want.
And this pawn, this bishop, is making a line at that king.
Yep. So
which then pins that pawn.
Yep. So if the pawn moves, it's dead. But the thing is if the pawn moves like that, and the bishop comes in, the queen is a badass.
We're not to the queen yet. Put the queen back.
Hey, the queen is still a badass.
But if this pawn moved out of the way, this bishop would move all the way in and kill the king.
Yep.
So this pawn is pinned and not allowed to move.
Yep. Next is the queen, which is a badass.
The next piece to talk about is the queen. Which piece is your queen, Jewel?
This piece.
So the queen?
D8.
D8 or D1.
Ooh.
And the white queen starts on a white square, and the black queen?
Black square.
And that helps you remember for how to set it up. And how can the queen move, Jewel?
The queen can move like this.
Like a bishop?
Yep. It can also move.
It can also move
straight forward or straight to the side. So it can pretty much move everywhere. Every single direction, but only
So if it moves to here, it can then move to here?
Yep, and kill that.
All right. And I guess that incidentally brings us into attacking. And a piece captures another piece by moving into the square that it was in. So the next piece to talk about is the knight.
The knight is one strange piece. It is the only piece that can jump over other pieces. It can move in an L shape. So it can move like, I'm just going to drag it so you can see it. It can also move like this. Or it could move like this. And if there's more, and it can also move like this.
All right, so it goes 2 steps in one direction,
Or that.
and then 1 step in a different direction.
Yep.
And unlike the other pieces, like this rook is blocked and can't move over here, this knight is not blocked and can jump over there.
That is why knight is a quite valuable piece, because if we put this whole thing back together, bishop, knight, rook, and here. The knights are the first pieces that are allowed to move, because no matter what, they can move straight forward. They can move here. It doesn't matter that there's a guy here.
So they're the fastest to develop because they're allowed to jump over the pawn line.
Yes.
There is another cool fact about a knight.
What?
All right, so we're going to develop the queen to a square. I'm going to go there. Now, attack my queen with your knight. Okay, so remember we said the queen is a badass, and she can move as far as she wants in any direction, diagonally or horizontally.
The thing is the queen cannot go in an L shape to attack.
So whenever the knight is attacking the queen, he's like a little queen sniper where he can't be hit, but she can.
The thing is if you move the knight like we just did to make the turn, here's another problem. All the queen has to do is, and you're gone.
You're not gone.
Well, you barely got a chance to live.
No, let's talk about this for a second. This knight is protected by this pawn.
Huh?
This queen is so much more valuable than that knight. Am I really going to trade that queen for the knight? Because if I take that knight, then you take the queen back. That's not a win for me. That's another reason it's good to develop the knights, which can jump over pawns, before the queens. Because you're willing to trade knights, and you're not willing to trade a queen for anything but a queen.
You're always willing to trade a pawn.
Trade a pawn, but don't throw them away. You want to get something for them. You want to get another pawn for them. Or something, right?
I am not editing that act.
All right.
I am not. Okay.
So hold on. Another interesting thing to look at from the position you've walked us into.
Hey.
Hey!
Hey.
Hey!
Hey.
You cannot move this piece because the queen has that pinned. But you can move this piece.
One step just to attack.
1 step.
Next.
Attacking the queen, protected by a pawn, and your knight is still protected by the bishop.
So. Yep, go on.
All right. The king.
This is the most important piece.
So the entire objective of the game is to get the other player's king. And the king has a little crown with a cross on it.
Yeah.
Now,
Very Christian of him. Yes, yes.
no matter how many pieces your opponent has on the board, no matter what their position is or how much more powerful they are than you, if you get their king, you win. So the king is ultimately what the game is all about.
So pretty much, just give me a moment. If this happens, and we're just going to change these a lot. So, this is just
be next to each other.
Why not?
Because if this king is threatened, this king can't move into that square because this king would take him.
But if they're next to each other, though.
How did they get there? They're not allowed to get there. It's against the rules. I promise.
How do they ever attack?
I don't believe him, Joe. He's lying to you.
Why are you lying, boy?
So the way a king can move is he can move in any direction, but he's only allowed to go one space.
So, or he can do all that. Now, I could move any direction, but we know that the pawn can move one square. So, we don't want to move here because in 2 turns the pawn would be threatening us. So we'll just move to the side.
I didn't mean to do this, but it flowed into it. So let's keep walking this pawn.
Well, if I go forward now, I'm in danger. So instead of going forward, I go diagonally.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep walking that pawn. What do you do next?
Now you can't attack me.
I can't.
So I can move. I don't want to move forward because then it'll be your turn and you take me.
Right? You can't. You're not allowed to move into check, so you can't move into any of these squares because of the king, or that square because of the pawn. So what are you going to do?
I'm going to go diagonal.
Okay, and I'm going to walk that pawn another square.
No.
Oh, that's the teaching moment we're heading for here. So what happens? Move your king anywhere.
It's not going to matter.
No, you can't. Move your king any legal square.
Legal, like anything.
So what happens when we move this pawn all the way to the back rank?
There is something special. No matter what, if this pawn infiltrates the starting place of the king or
The sharding place?
thrower, stop it.
You sharded?
Anywhere on the 8 line, on the opponent's first line,
The back rank is how we say that.
it turns into a queen.
So we can replace that pawn with a queen. And if there's 2 queens on the board, that is fine. If there's 8 queens on the board, that is perfectly fine. I don't have the pieces to make it work, but it's perfectly fine. Now sometimes somebody won't have enough pieces and they'll use a rook upside down and call that a queen.
Wait,
And as long as everybody agrees, that's a queen now. The rule is not that the pawn has to be promoted into a queen. It can be promoted into any piece. People choose queens 99.99% of the time
Wait,
because she's a badass.
Wait, it can turn into a king.
They can't turn into a king. I apologize. I misspoke.
Argue.
All right. So there's a couple of special moves that don't come up early in the game and don't come up in every game. But we're going to go ahead and talk about them so that you have the full body of knowledge. There is a move called en passant,
En passant.
which is French for in passing. So if black gets this pawn walked all the way up to his 5th rank,
5th, no 4th.
it is the 4th rank.
4.
When I move a pawn on its first move, I'm allowed to move it 2. But because my pawn had to run through that square to get there, this pawn is allowed to take it, even though it's not there. Because it had to be there, so if the pawn makes a quick decision, he can get him on the move.
Okay, weird, okay, but okay.
And the reason for this is to keep the balance of power where this pawn can't just skip that guy. Alright, the last special move is called castling.
Castles!
So,
I like castles.
you have to have some pieces out of the way. You have to have the knight out of the way. And you have to have the bishop out of the way.
Bishop.
And then, remember we said that the king was only allowed to move 1 square?
Yeah.
And we said that the knight was the only piece that was allowed to jump over another piece, right?
Yeah.
Special case for castling where the king is allowed to move 2 squares and the rook is allowed to jump over him.
Castles don't jump, don't be ridiculous.
And this is like the king running from the center of the board through an escape hatch into a hidey hole.
Choose a hidey hole.
I am?
You are all
Let's help the king into me.
You are also allowed to do this on the other side. Now there have to be no pieces in the way. Nope, 2 spaces.
2 spaces.
2 spaces, and the rook comes around. No pieces in the way, and you can't do it if you're moving through a threatened square. So if we got a bishop aimed like that, where you would land and check, you're not allowed to do it. If we've got a bishop aimed like that, where it's threatening the square that the king has to run through,
Nope.
you're not allowed to do it.
Okay.
And so those are all the legal moves in chess. Fast review. Pawns can move one square. They can only move one square. They move one square. They don't attack forward. If the enemy pawn is sitting right across from him, there's nothing this pawn can do because he's attacking these two squares. So if I want to protect this pawn has to be there. On a pawn's first move, it's allowed to move two squares.
Where's the move of a pawn? Moves of a pawn. This is legal. Totally.
And then from here, if this pawn moves two, this pawn can take him in passing.
Yes.
All right. Bishops. Bishops move diagonally. They move diagonally as far as they want, as long as they are not blocked by another piece. This knights. Knights go in an L shape, a Tetris L, where they move two in one direction and one to the other, or two in this direction and one that one. Knights are the only pieces that are allowed to jump over other pieces to get there, which make them good for early development. The rook. The rook moves as far as he wants, as long as the square is not blocked, in a straight line, vertically or horizontally.
Sometimes they cover the board up just to show.
The queen can move like a rook or a bishop. She can do anything she wants
And
because
she's a badass.
the king can move in any direction, but only one square, except when he's castling.
Yep. Special. This is the moves.
And that's it. That's all the moves.
Yep. So we packed. That was okay. Why do we make two passing attacks though?